The distress beacon had been screaming into the void for 11 years before anyone answered it. Commander Ethan Vance heard it first as a single red line crawling across his console, a signal so old and so faint that the ship's AI had almost filed it under background noise, but something in the pattern made him stop scrolling through his morning reports. It wasn't random. It was a heartbeat. Slow, deliberate, dying. "Confirm origin," he said. "Veyra system," the AI replied. "Third planet. Atmospheric composition suggests habitability, though current readings show catastrophic ecological collapse. The beacon is emanating from a single structure, likely a bunker or shelter." Ethan had commanded the rescue cruiser Meridian for 6 years, and in that time he had pulled survivors from asteroid mining collapses, quarantined colonies, and one memorable incident involving a runaway terraforming reactor. He had never chased a signal this old. Most rescue protocols wrote off anything past the 5-year mark. Statistically, there was nothing left to save. But the Meridian wasn't just any ship, and Ethan wasn't the kind of commander who let statistics make his decisions for him. "Set a course," he said. "We're not leaving anyone to die alone in the dark, if we can help it." The planet, when they reached it 3 weeks later, was a ruin of a world. Once blue oceans had turned to poison, the sky wore a permanent bruise of ash clouds. Whatever had happened here, war, plague, some slow-motion catastrophe no one had bothered to name, it had scoured the surface clean of everything except one buried structure, kilometers beneath a mountain range, sealed behind kilometers of collapsed rock. It took the Meridian's engineering crew 4 days to cut through. What they found waiting for them at the bottom of that tunnel was not the corpse the mission planners had quietly prepared for. It was a woman, not human. The elongated bone structure of her face, the faint luminescence beneath her skin, and the second inner eyelid that flickered when the rescue team's floodlights hit her too directly all made that clear. But close enough, painfully close enough, that Ethan felt something catch in his chest the moment she opened her eyes and looked at him like she didn't believe he was real. "You came," she said in halting trade common, her voice raw from years of disuse. "No one comes for Veyra, not anymore." "I'm Commander Ethan Vance," he said, kneeling beside the cot they'd rigged for her. "You're safe now. What's your name?" "Sael." She said it like she hadn't spoken her own name aloud in a long time either. "Sael Ithrenya, last of the Ithran line, last of Veyra, I think, now." She had survived alone in that bunker for 11 years, rationing a shrinking cache of preserved food, running a failing life support system on a prayer and her own stubborn will, keeping the beacon alive on scavenged power cells long after the rest of her people's technology had gone dark around her. She had buried her family with her own hands before the water gave out. She had done the math more than once on how many days she had left and kept living anyway. Ethan had seen a lot of things in his years of rescue work. He had never seen anyone hold on to hope that long, that hard, with that little reason to. "Why didn't you give up?" he asked her days later, once she'd regained enough strength to sit upright and eat solid food without help. They were in the Meridian's observation lounge, Veyra's dying husk turning slowly beneath them. Sael considered the question with the same careful weight she seemed to give everything, because giving up felt like agreeing that I was already dead, and I wasn't. She looked at him. "I still don't understand why you came. Your people had no treaty with mine, no trade agreement, nothing to gain." "We didn't need one," Ethan said. "The signal was calling for help. That was reason enough." She studied him for a long moment, the way someone studies a piece of language they're not sure they've translated correctly. "Your kind is strange, Commander Vance." "You have no idea," he said, and for the first time since they'd pulled her out of that bunker, she almost smiled. The weeks that followed were not what either of them expected. Sael had been trained from childhood in Veyran statecraft and survival doctrine. Cold disciplines built for a species that had learned, the hard way, that sentiment was a luxury the universe rarely allowed. She watched the human crew of the Meridian with something between fascination and disbelief. The way they argued and then forgave each other within the hour. The way Ethan personally reviewed every rescue candidate's file himself instead of delegating it because he refused to let a name become just a statistic. The way an entire engineering team had worked 18-hour shifts, unasked, unpaid overtime, because they couldn't stand the thought of Sael dying while they slept. "You give so much of yourselves away," she told Ethan one evening, "for people who owe you nothing back?" "That's not how we think about it," he said. "Then how do you think about it?" He considered the question seriously, the way he considered everything. "I think we've decided that not helping, when we're able to, costs more than helping ever could, even when it's expensive, even when it hurts." Sael was quiet for a long time after that. Then she said very softly, "On Veyra, we call that kind of thinking a fatal weakness." "And now?" "Now I think it might be the only thing standing between someone and the dark," she said. "I think it might be why I'm still breathing." It would be easy to say that what grew between them was inevitable, that two people who had crossed the space between dying and living together were bound to find each other. But it wasn't inevitable. It was chosen, deliberately, day by day. In the hours Ethan spent teaching her Standard, instead of relying on translation software, so she could speak for herself instead of through a machine. In the way Sael began correcting his terrible pronunciation of Veyran vowels and laughing, actually laughing, for the first time since her rescue. In the careful, unhurried way, they built trust between a woman who had learned that hope was a liability and a man whose entire life's work was proof that it wasn't. The trouble came, as trouble does, from the past she thought she'd buried with her people. 3 months into her recovery, the Meridian's long-range sensors picked up a ship entering the Veyra system. Old Veyran military hardware, repurposed and repainted, but unmistakable to Sael the moment she saw the design on the display. "Scavengers," she said, her voice gone flat and cold in a way Ethan hadn't heard from her before. Or worse, salvagers who worked for the faction that caused the collapse. They'll have tracked the beacon the same way you did. If they find out someone survived, someone who knows what really happened down there, they won't let that story reach anyone." "Then we don't let them find you," Ethan said. "Ethan!" She caught his arm before he could turn to give the order. "You don't understand what you'd be risking. These aren't people who negotiate. If they come for me, they come prepared to burn this ship out of the sky rather than let me leave it alive." "Then I suppose," Ethan said, "we'd better make sure they don't get the chance." What followed was not a battle so much as a bluff, played out across 3 tense hours of shadowing maneuvers and false transponder signals, the Meridian using every trick in a rescue cruiser's admittedly limited combat repertoire to convince the Salvager Ship that it was chasing an empty wreck instead of a living witness. Ethan stayed on the bridge the entire time, running the deception himself rather than delegate it because, as he told Sael afterward when the Salvager Ship finally broke off and retreated toward the outer system, convinced there was nothing left worth the risk. Some things you don't hand off to someone else. Not when it's someone's life on the line. "You could have died proving that to me," Sael said, once the adrenaline had drained out of both of them and left something quieter behind. "I wasn't proving anything," Ethan said. "I was doing my job." "No." She shook her head slowly. "I've watched your kind for 3 months now. This wasn't your job. This was a choice. You keep making that same choice. over and over, and I keep waiting for the day you stop. And you never do. Would it change anything if I told you I don't plan to?" Sael looked at him for a long moment, and something in her careful, wary expression finally, fully unlocked. "It already has," she said. Veyra's sun would burn out in another 400 years, astronomers estimated. Plenty of time, cosmically speaking, though there was no one left on the surface to see it happen. Sael never went back down to the planet after that first day. There was nothing left there for her except graves, and she had said her goodbyes to those a long time ago, alone in the dark, when she still believed no one was coming. She stood instead at the Meridian's observation window as the ship broke orbit, watching her dead world shrink behind them into just another point of light, and let herself, for the first time in 11 years, think about what came next, instead of what she'd have to survive. "Where do we go now?" she asked. Ethan came to stand beside her. "Wherever you want. You're not a rescue statistic anymore, Sael. You get to choose." She was quiet for a moment, watching the stars. "Then I choose to stay," she said. "Here, with you, with whatever comes next." Outside the window, Veyra's light finally winked out of sight, and neither of them looked back.